Imagine stumbling across a document that wasn't meant for your eyes, a simple piece of paper that shatters everything you thought you knew about someone you loved and respected your entire life. For Ethan Mitchell, what he found tucked away in his father's desk drawer wasn't just shocking, it was the beginning of the end. His father, Sheriff James Mitchell of Pinewood County, had been the embodiment of law and order in their small Texas community for over 20 years. But as Ethan would soon discover, the badge his father wore masked a dark secret that would destroy their family and rock an entire community to its core. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What would you do if you discovered the person who taught you right from wrong, who lectured you about honesty and integrity, was stealing drugs from police evidence and selling them on the streets? This is Ethan's story, a story of betrayal, corruption, and a desperate act that led a son to shoot his own father 6 times in the very home where he was raised. Ethan Mitchell was proud to be Sheriff Mitchell's son. Growing up in Cedar Ridge, a small town nestled in the heart of Pinewood County, Texas, Ethan had always looked up to his father. James Mitchell stood tall in his crisp uniform, the silver star on his chest catching the sunlight as he patrolled their town of just under 15,000 people. He was strict but fair, a man the community respected. At Sunday church services, people would shake his hand, thanking him for keeping their streets safe. At home, he taught Ethan the importance of honor, of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Life in the Mitchell household had its routines. Every morning, Sheriff Mitchell would kiss his wife Maria goodbye, ruffle Ethan's hair, and head to the department. Every evening, he'd return home with stories of his day. Criminals caught, disputes resolved, a community served. Dinner conversations often centered around justice and the law. The badge means something, he'd tell Ethan. It means we're the ones who stand between good folks and those who do them harm. Ethan had just turned 23 and was finishing his criminal justice degree at the State University. He'd come home for the summer, helping his mother with the family ranch while contemplating following in his father's footsteps. The idea of joining the Pinewood County Sheriff's Department made him nervous, but excited. He wanted to make his father proud. It was a scorching July afternoon when everything changed. Maria had asked Ethan to find some tax documents in his father's home office. Sheriff Mitchell was working a double shift, dealing with increased drug activity on the county's eastern border. Ethan sat at his father's desk, rifling through neatly organized folders in the bottom drawer. His fingers brushed against something, taped to the underside of the drawer. Curious, he reached further back and felt the unmistakable crinkle of plastic. Pulling it out, Ethan found himself staring at a small bag of white powder. His first thought was confusion. Why would his father have evidence at home? But next to it was something that made his blood run cold. A small notebook with dates, names, and amounts. Amounts that matched deposits into an account number Ethan didn't recognize. Ethan's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. The evidence was unmistakable. For at least 3 years, someone had been meticulously tracking drug sales. Names of people Ethan recognized from around town were listed alongside dollar figures. But it was the handwriting that made his stomach drop, the same precise penmanship that had signed his school permission slips and birthday cards. His father's handwriting. This had to be a mistake. There had to be an explanation. Ethan carefully returned everything exactly as he'd found it, his mind racing. Perhaps this was part of an undercover operation. Maybe his father was building a case. He tried to convince himself of innocent explanations, but deep down, doubt had taken root. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself watching his father more closely. He noticed small details he'd overlooked before, how Sheriff Mitchell would take calls in private, stepping outside onto the porch where no one could overhear. How sometimes he'd return home late at night, claiming he'd been handling paperwork, but smelling of the outdoors. How certain names mentioned around the dinner table would make him tense almost imperceptibly. Ethan needed to know more. He couldn't confront his father without being certain, and he couldn't go to anyone at the department, not when the allegations involved the sheriff himself. So he began his own investigation, careful to avoid raising suspicion. The opportunity came when Sheriff Mitchell left his phone charging in the kitchen one evening while he showered. Ethan had never invaded his father's privacy before, but the weight of what he suspected pushed him forward. The phone was locked, but Ethan knew the code, his sister Rebecca's birthday. Inside, he found text messages from a contact listed simply as K. Meeting confirmed, same place. Bring the usual. Price has gone up, people asking questions. Need to talk about Torres, getting nervous. Torres. Deputy Alex Torres was his father's right-hand man at the department. What did he have to be nervous about? Ethan scrolled further, finding more cryptic messages that, taken together, painted a disturbing picture. References to packages and deliveries that didn't sound like legitimate police business. And then he found something that removed all doubt, a photo of his father standing next to a man Ethan recognized as Kyle Bennett, a known drug dealer who'd somehow managed to avoid serious charges despite multiple arrests. His heart pounding, Ethan heard the shower turn off. He quickly replaced the phone exactly as he'd found it and retreated to the living room, mind reeling with the implications. His father, the sheriff, the man who'd lectured him about integrity his entire life, was selling drugs seized from the evidence room. The hypocrisy burned like acid. For the next week, Ethan lived in a state of constant anxiety. He began following his father, careful to maintain his distance. One evening, when Sheriff Mitchell claimed to be meeting with the district attorney, Ethan tailed him to an old barn on the outskirts of town. From a distance, he watched as his father met with Kyle Bennett and another man he didn't recognize. Money changed hands. Packages were loaded into the trunk of Bennett's car. Each discovery felt like another nail in the coffin of Ethan's respect for his father. But he needed more. Something concrete. Something that couldn't be explained away. He needed proof that would stand up if this ever came to light. The Pinewood County Fair provided the perfect cover. With the department stretched thin managing the crowds, Ethan knew the evidence room would be minimally staffed. He'd grown up visiting his father at work. No one would question his presence. Using his father's spare key, the one kept in the kitchen drawer for emergencies, Ethan entered the department after hours. Officer Jackson, a rookie who clearly idolized Sheriff Mitchell, was on duty. "Hey, Ethan, looking for your dad." "Yeah, he asked me to grab some files from his office," Ethan lied smoothly, hating how easily the deception came. "He's over at the fairgrounds. Should be back in an hour or so." "I'll wait in his office. Got some reading to do anyway." Ethan held up his criminal justice textbook as proof. Once alone in his father's office, Ethan began searching. The official logs for the evidence room should show all incoming and outgoing items. If drugs were missing, there would be a discrepancy somewhere. He found the logs in a filing cabinet, neatly organized by date. Comparing them with the notebook he'd discovered at home, patterns emerged. Cases where significant amounts of drugs had been seized, followed by notations of destroyed or sent to lab, but with no corresponding lab reports. And then he found something that made his blood run cold. A case from 2 years ago, a major bust that had made headlines. According to the official record, over 20 kilos of cocaine had been seized, but the actual inventory form signed by Officer Jackson noted 25 kilos. 5 were missing, and according to his father's secret notebook, those 5 kilos had been sold over the course of 6 months for tens of thousands of dollars. Ethan photographed everything with trembling hands. As he was replacing the files, he heard footsteps approaching. He quickly closed the drawer and pretended to be reading when Deputy Torres entered. "Ethan, didn't expect to see you here." Torres's tone was friendly, but his eyes were suspicious. "Just waiting for my dad. We're supposed to grab dinner." Another lie, easier than the first. Torres nodded slowly. "He's tied up at the fair. Some kid's causing trouble. Said to tell you he'd be late." "Thanks. I'll head home then. Mom's probably got dinner ready anyway." As Ethan walked out, he felt Torres's gaze burning into his back. Something told him the deputy wasn't convinced. Had he seen Ethan with the files? Did he suspect? Ethan couldn't be sure, but a new fear took root alongside his disgust, fear for his own safety and for his mother's. That night at dinner, Sheriff Mitchell was unusually quiet. He picked at his food, occasionally glancing at Ethan with an expression that was difficult to read. Was it suspicion, guilt? Ethan couldn't tell, but the tension was unbearable. "Everything okay at the fair?" Maria asked, trying to break the silence. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Fine. Just some teenagers with alcohol. Nothing serious." Sheriff Mitchell's voice was clipped. After dinner, Ethan retreated to his room, spreading out the evidence he'd gathered. Photos of the logs, screenshots of text messages, his own notes tracking his father's movements. It was overwhelming, and with each piece he reviewed, his anger grew. His father had betrayed everything he claimed to stand for. He'd betrayed his badge, his community, and his family. But there was more. As Ethan dug deeper, he discovered financial records showing large deposits into an offshore account. His father wasn't just selling drugs, he was building a nest egg, perhaps planning to disappear one day. The thought of his father abandoning them, leaving them to face the fallout of his crimes, was too much to bear. The next morning, Sheriff Mitchell left for work earlier than usual. Ethan noticed his father's demeanor had changed. He seemed more guarded, less willing to engage in their usual banter. Had Torres said something? Did his father suspect that Ethan knew? Unable to sit still with his thoughts, Ethan drove to Carter's Diner, a local spot where he could think. As he sipped his coffee, staring out at the town his father had sworn to protect, he noticed Kyle Bennett enter. The drug dealer took a booth in the back, and moments later, Deputy Torres joined him. They spoke in hushed tones, Bennett looking increasingly agitated as Torres spoke. When they parted, Bennett's face was pale. Ethan followed Bennett as he left the diner, maintaining a careful distance. The man drove to Lake Travis, parking near a secluded spot where a small dock extended into the water. Ethan watched from behind a cluster of trees as Bennett made a call, pacing nervously. "It's not my fault," Bennett was saying, his voice carrying across the still morning air. "Torres says your son was in the office last night, going through files. We need to clean house now." Ethan's blood turned to ice. They were talking about him. They knew he'd been looking, and now they were planning something that involved cleaning house. Bennett ended the call and stood for a moment, staring out at the lake. Then he got back in his car and drove away. Ethan remained hidden, his mind racing. His father knew, and if he knew Ethan had discovered his operation, what would he do? Would he run? Would he try to silence anyone who could expose him? The thought of his mother, oblivious to the danger, spurred Ethan into action. He needed to protect her, to get her away from his father until he could figure out what to do with the evidence. He drove home, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, preparing what he would say. But as he pulled into the driveway, he saw his father's patrol car already there. Sheriff Mitchell was home hours before his shift should have ended. Through the window, Ethan could see him moving quickly through the house, gathering items and stuffing them into a bag. He was running, just as Ethan had feared. With a surge of determination, Ethan entered the house. His father looked up, startled, then composed his features into a calm mask. "Ethan, you're home early." "So are you," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Sheriff Mitchell nodded, continuing to pack. "Got called away on an emergency. Need to head to Austin for a few days." "An emergency?" Ethan stepped closer. "Or are you running because you know I found your notebook? Because you know I was in your office?" His father froze, then slowly straightened. The pretense dropped from his face, replaced by a cold, calculating look Ethan had never seen before. "You don't understand what you're getting into, son." Sheriff Mitchell's voice was low, dangerous. "Some things are complicated. Sometimes the line between right and wrong isn't as clear as they teach you in that university. Selling drugs isn't complicated, Dad. It's wrong. It's illegal. It's everything you taught me to stand against." His father's laugh was bitter. "The world isn't black and white, Ethan. Do you know what they pay a sheriff in a county like this? Barely enough to keep the ranch going. Your mother's medical bills alone? Don't you dare use Mom as an excuse." Ethan's voice rose. "You're supposed to uphold the law." "I've kept this county safer than it's ever been." Sheriff Mitchell shot back. "Who do you think keeps the real criminals? Out the gangs, the cartels, me. And if I take a little on the side from lowlifes like Bennett, who's really getting hurt?" The rationalization sickened Ethan. "Everyone, Dad. Everyone who trusted you. Everyone who believed in you. Including me." For a moment, something like regret flickered across his father's face. Then his expression hardened. "You need to forget what you think you know, Ethan. For your own good. For your mother's." Was that a threat? Ethan couldn't tell, but alarm bells rang in his mind. "Where is Mom?" "Book club. Won't be back for hours." Sheriff Mitchell zipped up his bag. "I need to go, and you need to stay out of this. When I come back, we'll talk. I'll explain everything." But Ethan knew there would be no coming back, no explanations. His father was leaving, abandoning them to save himself. All the evidence pointed to it. The packed bag, the offshore account, the conversation Bennett had had on the phone. "You're not going anywhere until we settle this," Ethan said, moving to block the door. His father's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I've already copied everything," Ethan bluffed. "The notebook, the logs, the texts with Bennett and Torres. If anything happens to me or Mom, it all goes to the state police." Sheriff Mitchell's hand moved toward his hip, where his service weapon rested in its holster. The gesture was subtle, perhaps unconscious, but it filled Ethan with a sudden, overwhelming dread. Would his own father harm him to protect his secret? The moment stretched between them, taut with tension and the weight of betrayal. Outside, the Texas sun beat down on the ranch house where Ethan had grown up, believing in his father's integrity. Inside, that belief lay shattered at his feet, replaced by fear and a desperate need to protect what remained of his family. Neither of them noticed Maria's car pulling into the driveway, her book club having ended early. Neither of them heard her steps on the porch or the turn of her key in the lock. And as Sheriff Mitchell's hand closed around the grip of his gun, neither of them was prepared for what would happen next. The sound of Maria's voice called out from the entryway, shattering the tense standoff between father and son. "James? Ethan? I'm home early." Sheriff Mitchell's hand froze on his weapon. His eyes, locked with Ethan's, showed a flicker of hesitation. In that moment, Ethan realized just how far his father might go to protect his secret. The man who had taught him to ride a bike, who had bandaged his scraped knees, who had sworn an oath to protect and serve, was now contemplating silencing his own son. Maria appeared in the doorway, her smile fading as she sensed the tension. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between them with growing concern. Neither man spoke. The silence stretched thin, brittle as ice over a winter pond. "James, why? Are you home? And what's with the bag?" Maria's voice trembled slightly as her eyes fell on the packed duffel. Something in her expression suggested this wasn't entirely unexpected, a fear long buried now rising to the surface. "It's nothing, Maria," Sheriff Mitchell said, his voice gentler than it had been moments ago. "Just a work trip. Austin. Few days." But Maria wasn't looking at him anymore. Her gaze was fixed on Ethan, reading the anger and betrayal written across his face. "Ethan? What's really happening?" The moment hung suspended between them. Ethan could see his father silently pleading with him. "Don't do this, not in front of her." But the weight of the truth was too heavy to bear alone. "Dad's been stealing drugs from evidence," Ethan said, the words tumbling out. "Selling them for years." Maria's hand flew to her mouth, but what struck Ethan wasn't shock in her eyes. It was resignation, as if somewhere, deep down, she had known all along, or at least suspected. "That's not," Sheriff Mitchell began, but Maria cut him off. "The money for my treatments," she said quietly. "The specialist in Houston. You said it was from your savings." Sheriff Mitchell's shoulders sagged. "Maria, please. Was any of it real?" she asked, her voice breaking. "All those lectures about honesty, about integrity, about being a man Ethan could look up to. Was it all just words?" Sheriff Mitchell's face hardened. "I did what I had to do for this family. When you got sick, don't you dare," Maria hissed, a fire igniting behind her tears. "Don't you dare use me as your excuse." "Sheriff." Mitchell's hand moved from his holster to run through his hair, a gesture of frustration Ethan had seen 1,000 times before. "You don't understand, either of you. The things I've had to do to keep this family afloat, to keep this county running." "So it's true," Maria whispered, the last of her denial crumbling. "All of it." Sheriff Mitchell looked between his wife and son, seeing the identical expressions of disillusionment. Something shifted in his demeanor, the righteous anger giving way to cold calculation. "I need to make some calls," he said, pulling his phone from his pocket. "And then we're all going to sit down and talk this through like a family." But Ethan knew better. He'd seen the text messages, heard Bennett's panicked voice at the lake. His father wasn't planning to talk. He was planning his escape. And now he was calling for backup. "Mom," Ethan said urgently, "we need to leave, now." Maria hesitated, looking at her husband of 25 years, with eyes that begged for a denial, an explanation, anything to make sense of the collapsing world around her. Sheriff Mitchell's phone was already at his ear. "Torres," he said, his voice low and controlled. "We've got a situation. My house." The pieces clicked into place in Ethan's mind. Torres wasn't just his father's deputy, he was his accomplice, and he was coming here to their home. Ethan lunged for his father, trying to grab the phone, but Sheriff Mitchell was faster. With a swift movement born of years of training, he shoved Ethan back against the wall. "Stay out of this, son," he growled, all pretense of the loving father gone. "You're in way over your head." Maria screamed as Ethan's head hit the wall with a sickening crack. The pain blurred his vision, but through the haze, he saw his father turn away, still speaking rapidly into the phone. "Needs to be handled. I'm bringing too much heat. Got to move the operation." The words faded in and out as Ethan struggled to remain conscious. His mother was at his side now, her hands gentle on his face, checking the back of his head where it had struck the wall. "James, stop this," she pleaded. "He's your son." But Sheriff Mitchell wasn't listening. He was pacing now, barking orders into the phone. 20 minutes. Bring the truck. Clean out the safe house." Ethan forced himself to focus. 20 minutes. That's how long they had before Torres arrived. 20 minutes to decide their fate. With his mother's help, he staggered to his feet. The room spun momentarily, but determination steadied him. He had to protect his mother, had to stop his father from destroying more lives. "Mom," he whispered. "Go pack a bag, just essentials. We need to leave before Torres gets here." Maria looked torn, decades of loyalty warring with the terrible. Truth now laid bare. But one look at the stranger her husband had become seemed to decide it. She nodded and slipped from the room. Sheriff Mitchell ended his call and turned back to face his son. For a moment, Ethan thought he saw regret in his father's eyes, but it was quickly replaced with cold resolve. "You should have left it alone." "Ethan," he said, his voice eerily calm, "some secrets are meant to stay buried." "Like Officer Peterson?" Ethan asked, a sudden realization dawning. "The officer who drowned last year, the one who worked evidence before Torres. Did he find out too?" A flash of surprise crossed his father's face, quickly masked. "Accidents happen." The confirmation hit Ethan like a physical blow. Peterson's death had been ruled an accident, his boat capsizing during a fishing trip, his body found washed ashore days later. But now Ethan understood. Peterson had discovered the truth, just as he had, and his father had made him disappear. "You killed him," Ethan whispered, horror spreading through him. "Your own deputy." Sheriff Mitchell didn't answer directly. Instead, he checked his watch. "Torres will be here soon, then we'll decide what happens next." The implication was clear. Ethan and his mother might be next on the list of accidents if they didn't fall in line. The thought sent ice through his veins. "I've got everything on record," Ethan bluffed again, desperate to buy time. "Sent to a friend at the university. If anything happens to us." "There's no record," his father cut him off, calling the bluff. "If there was, you'd have gone to the state police already." He was right. Ethan had gathered evidence, but he hadn't shared it with anyone. He'd wanted to confront his father first, to hear his explanation. A foolish, sentimental mistake that might now cost him and his mother their lives. From the hallway came the sound of Maria returning with a small bag. Sheriff Mitchell moved to intercept her, grabbing her arm with a force that made her wince. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Either of you." Maria looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Something flickered across Sheriff Mitchell's face. Pain, regret, perhaps even shame. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You know exactly who I am," he said. "The man who's kept this family above water. The man who paid for your treatments when insurance wouldn't. The man who's done whatever it took to provide for you and our son." "At what cost, James?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your soul." The question hung in the air between them, unanswered. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ranch. Time was running out. Ethan's mind raced. Torres would be here soon. His father was blocking the door. There had to be a way out, a way to get his mother to safety, the gun safe. The realization hit him suddenly. His father always kept a backup weapon in the gun safe in his study, if he could get to it. "I need to use the bathroom," Ethan said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Sheriff Mitchell's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Make it quick." Ethan moved slowly, fighting the dizziness from his head injury. As he passed the study door, he glanced inside. The gun safe was visible in the corner, partially hidden by his father's desk, just a few steps away. In the bathroom, he splashed cold water on his face, trying to clear his head. Through the small window, he could see the driveway. No sign of Torres yet, but he would be arriving soon. Ethan had to act now. He flushed the toilet for show, then stepped into the hallway. His father was still in the living room with his mother, their voices low and intense, moving as quietly as he could. Ethan slipped into the study and closed the door behind him. The gun safe's combination was his birthday, another painful reminder of his father's hypocrisy, using his son's birth date to protect the weapon that enforced his corruption. The lock clicked open, revealing the Glock 19 his father kept as A backup. Ethan had fired it before, on hunting trips and at the range. His father had taught him gun safety from an early age, ironically emphasizing that firearms were tools of protection, not violence. Hands trembling, Ethan checked that the gun was loaded. 6 bullets in the magazine. He tucked it into the waistband of his jeans, his shirt falling to conceal it. When he returned to the living room, his father was checking his watch again. "Torres should be here any minute," he said, almost to himself. Maria caught Ethan's eye, a silent question in her gaze. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "James," Maria said, drawing his attention, "please think about what you're doing. It's not too late to fix this." For a moment, it seemed like her words might be reaching him. Sheriff Mitchell's hard expression softened slightly. "Maria," he began, but was cut off by the sound of tires on gravel. Torres had arrived. Sheriff Mitchell moved to the window, peering out. "Stay here," he ordered, drawing his service weapon. "Both of you." As he stepped onto the porch, Ethan made his move. "Mom," he whispered urgently, "go out the back door. Take the truck. Get to Aunt Rebecca's house in Austin." Maria hesitated. "Ethan, I can't leave you. Please," he begged. "I'll handle Dad and Torres, but you need to be safe." The sound of voices carried from the front porch, his father and Torres speaking in hushed, urgent tones. They had minutes, maybe seconds. Maria embraced her son fiercely. "Be careful," she whispered, then grabbed her bag and slipped out the back door. Ethan moved to the front window, watching as his father and Torres conferred by the deputy's car. Torres was gesturing angrily, his face flushed. Sheriff Mitchell seemed to be trying to calm him down. Between them, on the hood of the car, was a duffel bag, larger than the one his father had packed. Evidence, perhaps? Money? Ethan couldn't be sure, but whatever it was clearly important. The back door slammed shut as Maria fled, the sound carrying in the evening air. Both men on the porch froze, then turned toward the house. Sheriff Mitchell's eyes met Ethan's through the window, understanding dawning on his face. Time slowed to a crawl as his father raised his gun, pointing it not at Ethan, but in the direction his mother had fled. The message was clear. She wouldn't get far. In that moment, everything crystallized for Ethan. His father wasn't just corrupt, he was dangerous. He had already killed once to protect his secret. He wouldn't hesitate to do it again, even if it meant harming his own wife. The weight of the Glock was heavy against Ethan's side as he watched his father start to move toward the back of the house. Torres was reaching for his own weapon. They were going after his mother. Ethan didn't remember drawing the gun, didn't remember opening the front door, didn't remember stepping onto the porch, but suddenly he was there, the Glock gripped in both hands, aimed at his father's back. "Stop!" he shouted. "Don't move!" Sheriff Mitchell turned slowly, his own weapon still in hand. His expression showed surprise but not fear. "Put the gun down, son. You don't want to do this." "I said don't move." Ethan's voice cracked with emotion. "You're not going after her." Torres had his hand on his holster now, but hadn't drawn. Yet his eyes darted between father and son, calculating. "Ethan," his father said, his voice softening to the tone he'd used when teaching Ethan to ride a bike, to fish, to shoot. "This isn't you. You're not a killer." "Neither were you," Ethan replied, his words choked with grief. "Or at least that's what I thought." Something like sadness crossed his father's face. "The world isn't black and white, son. Sometimes we do wrong things for right reasons." "Was killing Officer Peterson the right reason?" Ethan demanded. "Is threatening Mom the right reason?" Sheriff Mitchell's expression hardened. "You don't understand the position you've put us in. The people we answer to, they don't tolerate loose ends. We?" Ethan looked between his father and Torres. "You mean the cartel? That's who you're working for?" His father didn't answer, but the flash of confirmation in his eyes was all Ethan needed. "Jesus, Dad," he whispered. "How deep are you in this?" Too deep to walk away, Sheriff Mitchell admitted. But not too deep that we can't protect this family if you and your mother just do as you're told. Like Peterson did? Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. No. This ends now. Torres chose that moment to make his move, drawing his weapon with practiced speed. "Put it down, kid," he growled, "or I'll put you down." Sheriff Mitchell raised a hand. "Wait!" But it was too late. Ethan saw Torres's gun coming up, aiming at his chest. Saw his father turning, shouting something. Saw Torres's finger tightening on the trigger. Ethan fired. The first shot caught his father in the shoulder, spinning him around. Not intentional. Ethan had been aiming for Torres, but now Torres was returning fire, bullets splintering the wood of the porch beside Ethan's head. Ethan fired again, and again, and again. The shots echoed across the ranch, shattering the Texas twilight. When it was over, Torres lay motionless on the gravel driveway, and Sheriff James Mitchell, the man who had once seemed larger than life to his young son, was slumped against the porch railing, blood soaking through his uniform shirt in 6 distinct places. Ethan lowered the gun, his ears ringing from the gunshots. He moved forward on unsteady legs, kneeling beside his father. Sheriff Mitchell's breathing was labored, each inhalation a struggle. His eyes, however, were clear as they found Ethan's face. "Dad," Ethan whispered, the gun falling from his nerveless fingers. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" His father coughed, blood staining his lips. "Listen," he rasped, "there's more than just Torres. The operation, bigger than you know." Ethan leaned closer, trying to hear the fading words. Safe, behind the hunting trophies, evidence, names. Each word seemed to cost his father tremendous effort. "Protect your mother." Sheriff Mitchell's hand closed weakly around Ethan's wrist. "Didn't want this life for you." Ethan felt tears streaming down his face. "Why, Dad? Why did you do it?" His father's eyes drifted past him, focusing on something only he could see. Started small, just a little extra, then couldn't stop. They wouldn't let me. A rattling breath shook his father's frame. "Sorry, should have been. Better man." Those were the last words Sheriff James Mitchell ever spoke. His hand went slack in Ethan's grip, his eyes growing distant and fixed. The man who had taught Ethan about justice and honor, who had lived a double life of corruption and crime, was gone. In the distance, sirens wailed. Someone had heard the gunshots and called the police. Ethan remained kneeling beside his father's body, unable to move, unable to process the magnitude of what had just happened. The safe behind the hunting trophies. His father's final confession and gift. The evidence that would bring down whatever corrupt network had ensnared him. Names, proof, perhaps even redemption of a sort. As the first police cars pulled up, lights flashing across the darkening yard, Ethan rose to his feet. He would tell them everything about the drugs, about Peterson's murder, about Torres and whatever cartel connections lay behind it all. He would protect his mother, as his father had asked with his dying breath, and perhaps in time he would come to understand how a good man could lose his way so completely. But standing there on the blood-stained porch of his childhood home, watching officers approach with weapons drawn, one truth became crystal clear to Ethan Mitchell. The line between right and wrong wasn't as simple as his father had once taught him. It was a line that could blur, that could shift, that could vanish altogether when fear and greed and desperation took hold. And it was a line that, having now crossed it himself, Ethan would spend the rest of his life trying to redraw. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.